Chapter 1. The Dawn of Civilization. From hunter-gatherers to first empires. Our journey through the entire history of the world begins in a time long before written records, when humanity's story was just starting to unfold. Imagine our ancient ancestors living as hunter-gatherers, moving from place to place in search of food and shelter. These early humans, appearing around 200,000 years ago, would lay the foundation for everything that followed. The first major shift in human history came with the development of agriculture, approximately 12,000 years ago. This agricultural revolution transformed small communities of nomadic hunters into settled farmers. In regions like Mesopotamia, now modern-day Iraq, people began cultivating wheat and barley while domesticating animals such as sheep and goats. This change didn't happen overnight. It took thousands of years for these practices to spread across different parts of the world. As farming techniques improved, villages grew into towns, and towns expanded into cities. Around 5,000 years ago, something remarkable happened along the Fertile Crescent between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Here emerged one of humanity's first great civilizations, Sumer. The Sumerians gave us many gifts, including the concept of writing. Their cuneiform script, pressed into clay tablets, allowed them to record transactions, create laws, and document their stories. While Mesopotamia flourished, another civilization was rising along the Nile River in Egypt. Protected by deserts on both sides, Egyptian society developed in relative isolation. Their pharaohs, considered divine rulers, commanded the construction of monumental structures like the pyramids at Giza. These architectural marvels still stand today as testaments to their advanced engineering skills and organizational capabilities. Simultaneously, other great civilizations were taking shape across the globe. In the Indus Valley, cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro featured sophisticated urban planning with grid-like street patterns and advanced drainage systems. Meanwhile, in China, the Xia dynasty marked the beginning of Chinese civilization along the Yellow River. Each of these early societies contributed unique elements to human development, from writing systems to architectural innovations. However, not all developments during this period were peaceful. As resources became more valuable, conflicts between growing populations increased. Around 4,000 years ago, a group called the Akkadians, under their leader Sargon, established what many historians consider the world's first empire. They conquered neighboring territories, creating a vast network of trade and cultural exchange that stretched across much of the known world at that time. These early empires set important precedents for future civilizations. They developed complex social hierarchies, created legal codes, and established religious systems that would influence generations to come. Perhaps most importantly, they demonstrated humanity's capacity for both cooperation and conflict, themes that would continue to shape world history for millennia to come. The stage was now set for the rise of even greater civilizations. As we move forward in our historical journey, we'll see how these foundations laid by our ancient ancestors would lead to the emergence of mighty empires, world-changing philosophies, and technological advancements that would forever alter the course of human history. Chapter 2. The Rise and Fall of Ancient Superpowers. Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Bronze Age collapse. As dawn broke over the ancient world, two mighty civilizations emerged from the Fertile Crescent that cradled humanity's earliest achievements. In Mesopotamia, between the life-giving Tigris and Euphrates rivers, city-states like Ur and Babylon flourished under sophisticated systems of writing, mathematics, and law. The Sumerians, Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians each contributed their unique innovations to human development. Hammurabi's Code, one of history's earliest legal documents, established principles of justice that still influence our legal systems today. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon, though their existence remains debated, became one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Meanwhile, ziggurat temples reached toward the heavens, symbolizing humanity's spiritual aspirations. To the west, along the banks of the Nile River, rose another magnificent civilization. Egyptian society developed in remarkable isolation, protected by vast deserts on both sides. Their pharaohs, considered divine rulers, commanded the construction of architectural marvels that continue to awe us today. The Great Pyramid of Giza, built during the 4th dynasty around 2,500 years before Christ, remained the tallest man-made structure for nearly 4,000 years. Egyptian contributions extended far beyond their monumental architecture. They developed advanced medical practices, sophisticated irrigation systems, and a complex religious framework that influenced neighboring cultures. Their hieroglyphic writing system, preserved on temple walls and papyrus scrolls, documented not just their daily lives, but also their profound understanding of astronomy and mathematics. These ancient superpowers weren't isolated entities. They engaged in extensive trade networks that stretched across the known world. Mesopotamian merchants exchanged textiles and grains for Egyptian gold and ivory. This exchange wasn't limited to goods. Ideas, technologies, and cultural practices flowed along these trade routes, creating a rich tapestry of interconnected civilizations. However, this golden age couldn't last forever. Around 1,200 years before Christ, the ancient world experienced a catastrophic collapse known as the Late Bronze Age collapse. Within a few generations, nearly every major civilization in the eastern Mediterranean region fell into decline. The reasons remain debated. Climate change, natural disasters, internal rebellion, and the mysterious sea peoples all played their part. The Hittite Empire vanished completely. Mycenaean Greece entered a dark age that would last for centuries. Egyptian power waned significantly, retreating to its core territories along the Nile. Mesopotamian city-states struggled to maintain their former glory. Trade networks collapsed, literacy rates plummeted, and population centers shrank dramatically. Yet from this chaos emerged new opportunities. The power vacuum allowed smaller states to rise and new cultures to flourish. Ironworking technology spread throughout the region, eventually replacing bronze as the dominant metal. This technological shift, combined with new political structures and social organizations, would lay the groundwork for the next phase of human civilization. The story of these ancient superpowers serves as a powerful reminder of civilization's fragility and resilience. Their achievements laid foundations upon which future societies would build, while their collapse demonstrated how quickly even the most advanced civilizations could falter when faced with multiple challenges simultaneously. As we move forward in our historical journey, we'll see how these early lessons were learned, and sometimes forgotten, by subsequent civilizations. The patterns established during this period of cultural exchange, technological advancement, imperial expansion, and eventual collapse would repeat themselves throughout human history, each time on an increasingly larger scale. Chapter 3. The Classical World, Greece, Persia, and the Birth of Democracy. Our journey through world history now brings us to a period that would shape Western civilization for centuries to come. In the 5th century before Christ, two mighty powers emerged whose conflict would define an era: the Persian Empire in the east and the Greek city-states in the west. The Persian Empire, under rulers like Darius and his son Xerxes, stretched from India to Egypt, encompassing one of the largest empires the ancient world had ever seen. Their sophisticated administrative system connected diverse cultures through an extensive network of roads and trade routes. At the heart of their empire stood Persepolis, a magnificent capital that showcased Persian architectural brilliance. To the west, the Greeks had developed a unique system of independent city-states, each with its own government and culture. Athens, Sparta, Corinth, and Thebes competed for influence while sharing common language and religious practices. It was in Athens where something remarkable happened: the birth of democracy. Around 509 years before Christ, Cleisthenes introduced reforms that gave power to the people, creating a system where citizens could vote on important matters. The clash between these two worlds became inevitable. Between 492 and 480 years before Christ, the Greco-Persian Wars tested the strength of both civilizations. The famous Battle of Marathon saw 10,000 Greek hoplites defeat a much larger Persian force. Legend has it that a messenger ran 26 miles to Athens to deliver news of victory, an event commemorated in modern marathons. Perhaps the most dramatic confrontation came at Thermopylae, where 300 Spartans under King Leonidas held off thousands of Persian warriors for 3 days. Though ultimately defeated, their sacrifice bought precious time for the Greek forces to regroup. This delay proved crucial when the combined Greek navy achieved a decisive victory at Salamis, effectively ending Xerxes' invasion plans. In the aftermath of these wars, Athens entered its golden age under Pericles. The city transformed into a cultural and intellectual center, giving birth to achievements that still influence us today. Philosophers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle examined fundamental questions about existence and governance. Playwrights such as Sophocles and Euripides explored human nature through drama. Architects created the Parthenon, a temple dedicated to Athena that remains one of the finest examples of classical architecture. Meanwhile, Greek thinkers began formalizing concepts that would shape Western thought. Herodotus earned the title Father of History by documenting events systematically. Thucydides developed methods of historical analysis still used today. Mathematicians like Pythagoras and Euclid established principles that form the basis of modern mathematics. However, the Greek city-states couldn't maintain unity after their victory over Persia. Rivalries, particularly between Athens and Sparta, led to the devastating Peloponnesian War. Lasting from 431 to 404 years before Christ, this conflict drained Greek resources and weakened their collective power. The war demonstrated how internal divisions could destroy even the most advanced civilizations. To the north, Macedonia watched these developments closely. Under Philip II and later his son Alexander, they unified Greece before launching an ambitious campaign eastward. Alexander's conquests created one of history's largest empires, stretching from Greece to India. His campaigns spread Greek culture across vast territories, creating what historians call the Hellenistic period. This era saw remarkable cultural exchanges as Greek ideas merged with local traditions throughout the Middle East and Asia. Cities like Alexandria in Egypt became centers of learning, housing the famous library that attracted scholars from across the known world. Scientific advancements flourished, with figures like Archimedes making groundbreaking discoveries in physics and engineering. Yet even Alexander's vast empire couldn't last forever. After his death at Babylon in 323 years before Christ, his generals divided the territories among themselves. These successor kingdoms maintained Greek influence, but gradually absorbed local customs, creating unique blends of cultures that would continue to evolve. The legacy of this classical period cannot be overstated. From democratic principles to philosophical inquiry, from artistic achievements to scientific breakthroughs, the foundations laid during these centuries would influence countless generations. As we move forward in our historical journey, we'll see how these ideas traveled across time and space, shaping civilizations far beyond their Mediterranean origins. Chapter 4: Pax Romana, the Roman Empire, and the Shaping of Europe. In the year 27 before Christ, a new era dawned upon the Mediterranean world. After decades of civil wars and political turmoil following Julius Caesar's assassination, his adopted heir Octavian emerged victorious. Taking the name Augustus, meaning the revered one, he would become Rome's first emperor and establish what historians now call the Pax Romana. 200 years of relative peace and stability that fundamentally reshaped Europe. Augustus created an efficient administrative system that stretched from Britain to Egypt. He established a professional standing army, built an extensive network of roads connecting distant provinces, and implemented a standardized currency system. This infrastructure didn't just serve military purposes. It facilitated unprecedented movement of people, goods, and ideas across vast distances. Merchants could travel safely under Roman protection, spreading technologies like concrete construction and aqueduct engineering throughout the empire. The Roman legal system became another lasting legacy. Based on principles of justice, equality before the law, and property rights, Roman law influenced countless legal systems that followed. Their concept of citizenship evolved too, from exclusive rights for Romans to a more inclusive system that granted various privileges to inhabitants of conquered territories who adopted Roman customs. This policy of integration helped maintain stability across diverse regions and cultures. Roman urban planning left indelible marks across Europe. Cities like Londinium, London, Lutetia, Paris, and Augusta Treverorum, Trier, featured similar layouts with forums, basilicas, theaters, and public baths. These amenities weren't mere luxuries. They represented a sophisticated approach to civic life. Aqueducts brought fresh water from miles away, while sewage systems maintained public health. The famous saying, "All roads lead to Rome," wasn't just metaphorical. Rome's engineers created a road network totaling 50,000 miles, facilitating trade and communication. However, maintaining such a vast empire required constant vigilance. Along its borders, particularly in Britain and Germany, Roman legions faced persistent challenges from local tribes. The most infamous defeat came in the Teutoburg forest in the year 9 after Christ, where 3 Roman legions were annihilated by Germanic tribes under Arminius. This disaster established the Rhine River as Rome's permanent northern frontier in Europe and demonstrated the limits of imperial expansion. Despite these setbacks, Roman culture spread far beyond its military frontiers. Latin became the lingua franca of educated classes from Spain to Syria, laying foundations for the Romance languages we know today. Roman architectural innovations like arches, domes, and concrete construction techniques influenced building styles across continents. Even religious practices transformed as Roman tolerance allowed local deities to be worshipped alongside Roman gods, creating unique cultural fusions that persisted long after the empire's decline. Yet, beneath this apparent stability, significant changes were occurring. During the 2nd century after Christ, emperors like Trajan, Hadrian, and Marcus Aurelius expanded and consolidated the empire's borders while dealing with growing pressures from external threats. The Antonine Plague, arriving in the late 2nd century, caused massive population losses and economic disruption. Simultaneously, internal pressures mounted as maintaining such a vast territory proved increasingly difficult without modern communication technologies. The crisis of the 3rd century marked the beginning of Rome's gradual transformation. Between the years 235 and 284, the empire faced near constant instability, with 26 emperors claiming power. Economic troubles, military defeats, and social unrest characterized this period. However, Diocletian's reforms and Constantine's establishment of Constantinople as a new capital in the early 4th century temporarily revitalized the empire while fundamentally altering its character. Christianity's rise marked another crucial transformation. From persecuted sect to state religion under Constantine, Christianity provided a unifying cultural force that would shape European identity for centuries. The Council of Nicaea in 325 established core theological doctrines still followed by billions today. Yet this religious shift also reflected broader changes within Roman society: increasing bureaucracy, ruralization of population, and growing reliance on local power structures rather than centralized imperial control. As the western half of the empire gradually fragmented during the 5th century, many former Roman provinces maintained their Roman heritage while developing distinct regional identities. Local leaders, often of Germanic origin but thoroughly Romanized, continued using Roman administrative methods and maintaining Roman infrastructure as best they could. The division between Western and Eastern Roman empires became permanent, setting the stage for different historical trajectories that would shape European history for centuries to come. The legacy of Rome's Golden Age continues to influence our world today. From legal principles to architectural styles, from language families to administrative divisions, the Pax Romana's impact remains visible in countless aspects of modern society. As we move forward in our historical journey, we'll see how these Roman foundations adapted to new circumstances, merged with emerging cultures, and sometimes disappeared only to re-emerge centuries later in unexpected ways. Chapter 5. The Middle Ages. Feudalism, Vikings, and the spread of Christianity. As the Roman Empire's western half crumbled under internal decay and external pressures, a new era dawned across Europe: the Middle Ages. This period, spanning from the 5th to the 15th century, would witness profound transformations in society, governance, and spiritual life. In the power vacuum left by Rome's collapse, a new social and economic system emerged: feudalism. This hierarchical structure organized society into clearly defined roles. At the top stood monarchs who granted land to nobles in exchange for military service. These nobles, in turn, provided protection and land to lesser knights and peasants. The majority of people became serfs, agricultural workers bound to the land they worked, but protected by their lords. The medieval castle became the centerpiece of this new social order. Rising from strategic hilltops across Europe, these stone fortresses served as both military strongholds and administrative centers. Within their walls, lords dispensed justice, stored food supplies, and coordinated local defense. Peasants found refuge during times of conflict, while knights maintained their martial skills through regular training. This system created stability amid chaos, though at the cost of personal freedom for most commoners. While European society reorganized itself, another force was spreading across the continent with remarkable speed: Christianity. What had begun as a small Jewish sect in Roman Judea transformed into a powerful religious institution. Under leaders like Pope Gregory the Great, the Catholic Church established monasteries throughout Europe. These religious centers preserved classical knowledge, maintained agricultural innovations, and served as hubs for cultural development. Monastic orders like the Benedictines developed strict rules governing daily life. Their members dedicated themselves to prayer, study, and manual labor. Through their efforts, ancient texts were copied and preserved, laying foundations for future intellectual revival. The Church also played crucial roles in education, healthcare, and even diplomacy between warring kingdoms. By the year 1000, Christianity had become the dominant cultural force across Western Europe. However, not all interactions between cultures were peaceful. From Scandinavia emerged fierce warriors who would leave an indelible mark on European history: the Vikings. Between the 8th and 11th centuries, these seafaring raiders launched daring attacks along coastlines from England to Constantinople. Their longships, capable of navigating both open seas and shallow rivers, allowed them unprecedented mobility. The Viking Age began in earnest when Norse warriors sacked the monastery at Lindisfarne in 793. This attack sent shockwaves through Christian Europe and marked the beginning of nearly 3 centuries of Viking activity. While often remembered for their raids, the Norse also established settlements across Europe, Russia, and even North America. In places like Normandy and parts of Britain, they integrated with local populations, creating unique cultural blends that persist today. These Scandinavian warriors weren't just conquerors, they were skilled traders and explorers. Their roots stretched from Byzantium to Baghdad, connecting diverse cultures through commerce. They introduced new technologies, such as advanced shipbuilding techniques, and spread ideas across vast distances. The Danelaw in England and the Duchy of Normandy exemplified how Viking culture could merge with existing societies to create something new and dynamic. Meanwhile, within Europe itself, new political structures were emerging. The Holy Roman Empire, established in 962 under Otto the Great, represented an attempt to revive Roman authority in Central Europe. Though never matching its predecessor's unity or power, this loose confederation of German states would play crucial roles in medieval politics. Its emperors frequently clashed with popes over questions of authority, leading to significant developments in church-state relations. The investiture controversy, culminating in the Concordat of Worms in 1122, exemplified these tensions. It marked a crucial moment in defining secular versus spiritual power in medieval society. Such conflicts helped shape modern concepts of state sovereignty and religious freedom, while maintaining the Church's significant influence over European affairs. Throughout these centuries, technological innovations gradually transformed daily life. The heavy plow allowed cultivation of richer soils in northern Europe. Horse collars replaced oxen teams, increasing agricultural efficiency. Three-field crop rotation systems improved yields, while watermills and windmills provided new sources of power. These advances supported population growth and urbanization, setting the stage for future developments. By the 12th century, signs of significant change were appearing. Gothic cathedrals began reaching toward the heavens across Europe, symbolizing both spiritual aspirations and growing technical capabilities. Universities emerged in cities like Paris, Bologna, and Oxford, fostering intellectual pursuits that would eventually challenge established authorities. Trade networks expanded, bringing wealth to merchant classes and challenging traditional feudal hierarchies. The Crusades, beginning in 1100, marked another transformative phase. While officially religious wars aimed at reclaiming Jerusalem, these campaigns facilitated extensive cultural exchanges between Europe and the Islamic world. Knowledge of mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy flowed back to European shores, sparking what would later be called the Renaissance. Meanwhile, military orders like the Templars and Hospitallers demonstrated how religious fervor could combine with martial skill and financial innovation. As the 14th century approached, the medieval world faced new challenges. Climate changes contributed to agricultural difficulties, while population pressure strained resources. The Black Death, arriving in Europe in 1347, would claim millions of lives and fundamentally alter social structures. Yet from these crises emerged opportunities for change. Serfdom declined in many regions. National identities strengthened, and new economic practices developed. This complex tapestry of feudal obligations, religious devotion, cultural exchange, and gradual transformation laid foundations for modern Europe. As we move forward in our historical journey, we'll see how these medieval developments influenced subsequent periods, sometimes directly continuing traditions and other times reacting against them. The Middle Ages, far from being a dark age, proved remarkably creative and dynamic, shaping countless aspects of contemporary society. Chapter 6: Renaissance and Reformation. Transforming politics and faith. As Europe emerged from the Middle Ages, a remarkable transformation began that would reshape both intellectual thought and religious practice. In the 14th century, a cultural movement started in Italy that would fundamentally alter how people viewed themselves, their world, and their relationship with God. The Renaissance. The term Renaissance literally means rebirth, and this period marked the revival of classical learning and wisdom from ancient Greece and Rome. Cities like Florence became vibrant centers of artistic innovation and intellectual inquiry. Under the patronage of wealthy families such as the Medici, artists like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo created masterpieces that celebrated human potential and beauty. Their works weren't just artistic achievements. They reflected a new way of seeing humanity's place in the world. This cultural flowering coincided with significant technological advancements. The invention of the printing press by Johannes Gutenberg around 1450 revolutionized how information spread. For the first time, books could be produced quickly and relatively cheaply, making knowledge accessible beyond elite circles. This democratization of information would prove crucial in the years to come, as new ideas about religion, science, and governance began to challenge traditional authorities. While the Renaissance transformed culture and learning, another movement was brewing that would rock the foundations of Christendom itself. In 1517, a German monk named Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the door of Wittenberg Cathedral, protesting against what he saw as corruption within the Catholic Church, particularly the sale of indulgences. This act sparked what became known as the Protestant Reformation. Luther's ideas spread rapidly thanks to the printing press, finding receptive audiences across Northern Europe. His translation of the Bible into German made Scripture accessible to common people, challenging the Church's monopoly on religious interpretation. Other reformers, like John Calvin in Geneva, developed their own theological systems, creating diverse Protestant traditions that emphasized personal faith and Scripture over church authority. The Catholic Church responded with its own counter-reformation, implementing reforms while reaffirming traditional doctrines. The Council of Trent, lasting from 1545 to 1563, addressed many of the criticisms raised by Protestants while clarifying Catholic teachings. New religious orders like the Jesuits emerged, dedicated to education and missionary work. This period saw both violent conflicts and peaceful coexistence between Catholics and Protestants across Europe. These religious upheavals had profound political consequences. Rulers used religious affiliation to consolidate power and justify territorial claims. In England, King Henry VIII broke with Rome to establish the Church of England, setting off centuries of religious tension. The 30 Years' War, fought primarily between 1618 and 1648, devastated Central Europe as Catholic and Protestant states clashed. When peace finally came with the Peace of Westphalia, it established principles of state sovereignty that shaped modern international relations. The scientific revolution paralleled these developments, challenging long-held beliefs about the natural world. Figures like Nicholas Copernicus, Galileo Galilei, and Isaac Newton developed theories that placed humanity within a vast, comprehensible universe governed by natural laws. These discoveries didn't just change how people understood the cosmos. They demonstrated the power of observation and reason in seeking truth. Political thought also underwent radical transformation. Thinkers like Niccolò Machiavelli analyzed power dynamics in ways that challenged medieval notions of divine right and feudal obligation. His work, The Prince, remains controversial for its pragmatic approach to political leadership. Later, Thomas Hobbes and John Locke would develop theories about social contracts and individual rights that influenced democratic movements worldwide. Meanwhile, European exploration expanded horizons both literal and intellectual. Christopher Columbus's voyages to the Americas in 1492 opened new worlds for investigation and exploitation. Vasco da Gama's sea route to India around Africa transformed global trade networks. These encounters brought Europeans into contact with diverse cultures and civilizations, challenging assumptions about human development and civilization. The economic implications were equally profound. The influx of gold and silver from the Americas contributed to price revolutions across Europe. Banking systems developed more sophisticated credit mechanisms. Mercantilist policies shaped colonial enterprises as nations competed for wealth and influence. These changes laid foundations for modern capitalism while raising complex ethical questions about wealth accumulation and labor. By the 17th century, the combined effects of Renaissance humanism, religious reformation, scientific discovery, and global exploration had fundamentally altered European society. Traditional hierarchies based on birth and religious authority gave way to new conceptions of individual worth and rational inquiry. Artistic expression, scientific investigation, and political organization all reflected these shifts toward greater emphasis on human agency and empirical evidence. Yet these transformations came at a cost. Religious wars devastated populations. Indigenous peoples suffered under colonial rule. Women often found their roles restricted rather than expanded by these changes. The gap between rich and poor widened as commercial enterprises flourished. These contradictions would continue to shape Western development in subsequent centuries. As we move forward in our historical journey, we'll see how these intellectual and religious transformations influenced future developments in politics, economics, and culture. The Renaissance and Reformation didn't just change Europe. They set patterns of thought and action that would affect societies worldwide for generations to come. Their legacy continues to influence how we understand ourselves, organize our communities, and seek truth in an increasingly complex world. Chapter 7: Age of Exploration, Colonization, and the Columbian Exchange. In 1492, a Genoese navigator named Christopher Columbus set sail under the Spanish flag, seeking a western route to Asia. What he discovered instead would change the course of human history: the Americas. This moment marked the beginning of an era that would connect previously isolated continents through exploration, colonization, and unprecedented cultural exchange. The motivations driving this age of exploration were complex. European nations sought new trade routes to bypass Ottoman control of traditional paths to Asia. They desired precious metals like gold and silver to fund their growing empires. Religious zeal motivated missionaries to spread Christianity to new lands. Most importantly, advances in navigation technology, particularly the magnetic compass, astrolabe, and improved ship designs like the caravel, made long-distance sea travel more feasible than ever before. Portugal took the lead in early exploration along Africa's western coast. Prince Henry the Navigator established a school for navigation at Sagres, from which expeditions gradually worked their way southward. In 1488, Bartolomeu Dias rounded the Cape of Good Hope, opening the sea route to India. Vasco da Gama completed this journey in 1498, establishing a direct maritime connection between Europe and Asia that would transform global trade networks. Spain focused its efforts westward after Columbus's initial voyage. Subsequent expeditions led by figures like Hernán Cortés and Francisco Pizarro resulted in the conquest of powerful indigenous empires, the Aztecs in Mexico and the Incas in Peru. These campaigns weren't just military operations, they represented collisions between radically different civilizations. The Spaniards brought horses, steel weapons, and European diseases that devastated native populations who had no immunity against smallpox and other illnesses. This period witnessed what historians now call the Columbian exchange, a vast transfer of plants, animals, people, culture, and ideas between the Old World and the New. From the Americas came crops like potatoes, maize, tomatoes, and cacao that would revolutionize European agriculture and cuisine. In return, Europeans introduced wheat, sugarcane, cattle, and horses to the Americas. These exchanges fundamentally altered ecosystems on both sides of the Atlantic while creating new economic opportunities and challenges. The consequences of these encounters were profound and often devastating. The encomienda system implemented by Spanish colonizers forced indigenous people into labor on plantations and in mines. When native populations collapsed due to disease and exploitation, European powers turned to Africa for slave labor. This initiated the transatlantic slave trade, forcibly transporting millions of Africans to work primarily on sugar plantations in Brazil and the Caribbean. The demographic impact on Africa was catastrophic, while new racial hierarchies emerged in colonial societies. Other European nations soon joined the race for overseas territories. France established colonies in Canada and the Caribbean. The Dutch built a maritime empire, stretching from Indonesia to South Africa. England's early attempts at colonization faced setbacks, but eventually succeeded with settlements like Jamestown in 1607. Each colonial power developed distinct approaches to governance, economic exploitation, and relations with indigenous peoples, creating diverse patterns of cultural interaction and conflict. These colonial enterprises transformed global economic systems. Mercantilism became the dominant economic philosophy, emphasizing the accumulation of precious metals and maintaining favorable trade balances. European nations established exclusive trading companies like the British East India Company and the Dutch East India Company, which wielded immense political and economic power. Global trade networks emerged, connecting Asia, Africa, Europe, and the Americas in complex relationships of dependency and exploitation. However, these developments came at tremendous human cost. Indigenous civilizations were disrupted or destroyed. African communities suffered from the slave trade's depredations. Even European societies experienced significant changes as wealth flowed disproportionately to colonial elites, while rural populations faced increasing poverty. Environmental degradation accompanied agricultural expansion and resource extraction worldwide. Religious dimensions added further complexity to these interactions. Catholic missionaries followed conquistadors into the Americas, establishing churches and converting millions. Protestant denominations spread through English and Dutch colonies. These religious transformations sometimes created new spiritual opportunities, but often served as tools of cultural domination and social control. By the late 17th century, colonial competition intensified among European powers. Conflicts like the 30 Years' War and various Anglo-Dutch wars reflected these tensions. Meanwhile, colonial societies themselves began developing unique identities that would eventually challenge metropolitan control. The foundations were being laid for future independence movements, even as colonial empires continued expanding. This age of exploration and colonization established patterns of global interaction that persist to this day. It created unprecedented connections between distant regions while introducing profound inequalities and conflicts. As we move forward in our historical journey, we'll see how these colonial legacies influenced revolutions, industrialization, and modern global politics. The world had become permanently interconnected, for better and worse, setting the stage for both remarkable achievements and persistent challenges. Chapter 8: Revolutions and Enlightenment: Transforming Politics and Thought. In the 18th century, a wave of revolutionary fervor swept across Europe and the Americas, challenging established orders and transforming political thought. This period, known as the Age of Enlightenment, combined intellectual awakening with practical demands for liberty, equality, and self-governance. The Enlightenment began as a philosophical movement, with thinkers like John Locke, Voltaire, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau questioning traditional authority and advocating for human reason. Locke's theories about natural rights, life, liberty, and property directly influenced political discourse. His ideas about government by consent would later inspire revolutionary leaders in both America and France. Meanwhile, scientific advancements by figures like Isaac Newton demonstrated the power of rational inquiry, encouraging people to apply similar methods to social and political questions. These intellectual currents found practical expression in the American Revolution. Beginning in 1775, 13 British colonies in North America rebelled against what they saw as tyrannical rule from London. The Declaration of Independence, adopted on July 4, 1776, articulated Enlightenment principles in action. Thomas Jefferson's words, "All men are created equal and entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness," represented not just a break from Britain, but a radical reimagining of government's purpose. The American Revolution's success inspired others to seek similar freedoms. Across the Atlantic, France simmered with discontent. By 1789, financial crisis, social inequality, and widespread famine had created conditions ripe for revolution. On July 14th of that year, Parisians stormed the Bastille prison, marking the beginning of the French Revolution. What started as calls for reform quickly escalated into demands for complete systemic change. The Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, passed shortly afterward, echoed America's declaration while extending its principles more radically. France's revolution followed a complex trajectory. Initially led by moderate reformers, it soon fell under the influence of more radical elements. The Reign of Terror, orchestrated by Maximilien Robespierre and the Committee of Public Safety between 1793 and 1794, demonstrated how revolutionary ideals could become distorted. Thousands were executed by guillotine in the name of liberty and equality. Yet even this dark period reflected deeper tensions about how to implement Enlightenment ideals in practice. Meanwhile, revolutionary ideas spread beyond Europe and America. In Haiti, enslaved Africans launched their own revolution against French colonial rule in 1791. Led by figures like Toussaint Louverture, they fought not just for independence, but also for the abolition of slavery. Their victory in 1800 marked the first successful slave revolt in modern history, establishing Haiti as a free republic. This achievement challenged global assumptions about race and freedom while inspiring future liberation movements worldwide. Back in Europe, Napoleon Bonaparte emerged from France's revolutionary chaos. Rising from artillery officer to emperor, he embodied both revolutionary ideals and imperial ambition. Between 1804 and 1815, his armies carried French administrative reforms across much of Europe while simultaneously establishing authoritarian rule. The Napoleonic Code standardized legal systems in conquered territories, spreading revolutionary principles even as Napoleon himself became an autocrat. His eventual defeat at Waterloo in 1815 didn't end revolutionary aspirations. Instead, it marked a temporary pause before new waves of change. Industrialization accompanied these political transformations, creating new social classes and economic relationships. As factories replaced workshops, urbanization accelerated, and traditional social hierarchies faced unprecedented challenges. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels observed these changes, developing theories about class struggle and historical materialism. Their Communist Manifesto, published in 1848, analyzed industrial capitalism's effects while predicting future revolutionary movements. These ideas would shape political discourse for generations to come. Simultaneously, nationalist movements gained momentum across Europe, inspired by both revolutionary ideals and romantic notions of cultural identity. Peoples from Italy to Germany sought unification and self-determination. Giuseppe Garibaldi's campaigns in Italy and Otto von Bismarck's wars of German unification demonstrated how nationalism could both challenge existing states and create new ones. These developments transformed Europe's political map, while raising complex questions about sovereignty, identity, and governance. Cultural revolutions paralleled these political changes. Romanticism emerged as an artistic movement emphasizing emotion, nature, and individual experience. Figures like William Wordsworth, Lord Byron, and Mary Shelley explored themes of personal freedom and social critique through poetry and prose. Their works reflected broader societal shifts while influencing public opinion about political and social issues. Art became not just entertainment, but a tool for challenging authority and imagining alternative futures. Scientific advancements continued reshaping worldviews throughout this period. Charles Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection, published in 1859, challenged traditional religious explanations about humanity's origins. Developments in physics, chemistry, and medicine similarly transformed understanding about the natural world. These discoveries sometimes conflicted with established beliefs, but ultimately expanded human knowledge while demonstrating the power of empirical investigation. By the mid-19th century, revolutionary waves had transformed much of the Western world. The United States had established itself as an independent nation, though debates about slavery threatened its unity. France oscillated between republics and empires while gradually expanding democratic participation. Industrialization had created unprecedented wealth alongside stark inequalities. Nationalist movements continued reshaping Europe's political landscape. Each of these developments reflected Enlightenment principles in action while demonstrating their complex, sometimes contradictory implications. As we move forward in our historical journey, we'll see how these revolutionary transformations influenced subsequent periods. The ideas and institutions established during this era would face new challenges, from imperial expansion to total war, while continuing to shape global politics and thought. The Age of Revolutions proved remarkably creative and dynamic, fundamentally altering countless aspects of contemporary society while setting patterns that persist to this day. Chapter 9. The World at War: Causes and Consequences of Global Conflicts. Our journey through world history now brings us to a period that would test humanity's capacity for both destruction and resilience. In the early 20th century, global conflicts erupted with unprecedented scale and ferocity, reshaping nations and challenging fundamental assumptions about warfare and human civilization. The roots of these conflicts stretched back decades. By 1914, Europe had become a powder keg of competing nationalisms, complex alliances, and imperial ambitions. On June 28, 1914, in Sarajevo, Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary and his wife Sophie were assassinated by Gavrilo Princip, a Bosnian Serb nationalist. This single act triggered a diplomatic crisis that rapidly escalated into what we now call the First World War. What began as a regional conflict quickly became global. The intricate web of alliances drew countries into battle regardless of their direct involvement in the initial incident. Germany stood with Austria-Hungary, while France, Russia, and Britain formed the opposing Triple Entente. Within weeks, fighting spread across Europe, reaching Africa, Asia, and eventually involving the United States. The war introduced industrial-scale combat featuring new technologies like machine guns, tanks, and chemical weapons. The Western Front became particularly notorious for its trench warfare. Battles like Verdun and the Somme demonstrated war's brutal efficiency in taking human lives without achieving decisive victories. At Verdun, French forces under Philippe Pétain endured relentless German attacks, creating a symbol of national resistance encapsulated in the phrase, "They shall not pass." Meanwhile, the Battle of the Somme saw British forces suffer 60,000 casualties on the first day alone, highlighting the devastating consequences of outdated military tactics meeting modern weaponry. While European powers clashed, other regions experienced their own transformations. In Russia, mounting military failures and social unrest led to revolution. In March 1917, following months of protests and strikes, Tsar Nicholas II abdicated, ending 3 centuries of Romanov rule. The provisional government struggled to maintain control as Vladimir Lenin and the Bolsheviks promised peace, land, and bread to war-weary citizens. Their success in the October Revolution marked the beginning of Soviet Russia and set the stage for future ideological conflicts. Germany made one final attempt to break the stalemate with their spring offensive in 1918. Using innovative stormtrooper tactics, they achieved significant territorial gains, but ultimately couldn't sustain their advance. By summer, Allied counteroffensives, bolstered by fresh American troops, pushed German forces back. On November 11, 1918, an armistice was signed in a railway carriage at Compiègne, officially ending hostilities. However, this cessation of fighting merely marked the transition from battlefield to negotiating table. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, attempted to establish a new world order. While President Woodrow Wilson advocated for his 14 points, emphasizing self-determination and collective security through the League of Nations, European leaders prioritized punishing Germany. The treaty's harsh reparations and territorial losses created resentment that would haunt the interwar period. Simultaneously, colonial subjects who had fought for their imperial masters expected greater freedoms, setting the stage for future independence movements. Before peace could fully take hold, another crisis emerged: the Spanish flu pandemic. From 1918 to 1919, this global health catastrophe claimed between 50 and 100 million lives, more than the war itself. Unlike typical influenza outbreaks, it disproportionately affected young adults, further depleting societies already devastated by conflict. Poor hygiene conditions and mass troop movements facilitated its rapid spread, demonstrating how warfare could amplify natural disasters. These events profoundly transformed international relations. Old empires crumbled, giving rise to new nation-states in Central and Eastern Europe. Economic instability contributed to political extremism, most notably the rise of fascism in Italy and Nazism in Germany. Japan's expansionist policies in Asia reflected similar tendencies toward militarism and ultranationalism. Each development represented pieces falling into place for an even larger conflict, the Second World War. When Adolf Hitler invaded Poland in September 1939, triggering declarations of war from Britain and France, many recognized disturbing parallels with the previous conflict. Yet this war would surpass all previous ones in scope and horror. The Holocaust represented an unprecedented attempt at systematic genocide while battles raged across multiple continents. Technological advancements produced weapons capable of mass destruction, culminating in the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945. The aftermath of this second global conflict fundamentally restructured world power dynamics. The United Nations replaced the ineffective League of Nations, promising better mechanisms for maintaining international peace. Two superpowers emerged: the United States and the Soviet Union, initiating a Cold War that would dominate global politics for nearly half a century. Decolonization accelerated as former imperial powers lacked resources to maintain overseas territories. New economic systems and international institutions sought to prevent future conflicts through increased cooperation. As we move forward in our historical journey, we'll see how these global conflicts influenced subsequent developments. The lessons learned, or sometimes ignored, from these wars shaped everything from military strategy to human rights frameworks. They demonstrated humanity's capacity for both unimaginable cruelty and remarkable recovery. The patterns established during this period of global conflict continue to influence international relations, domestic politics, and cultural memory worldwide. Chapter 10. Modern Era: Technology, Globalization, and the Information Age. As we reach the 20th century's latter half, humanity stood on the brink of transformations that would redefine every aspect of life. The modern era emerged not just as a continuation of past developments, but as a fundamental shift in how humans interacted with their world, each other, and technology itself. The technological revolution began modestly enough with vacuum tubes and early computers that filled entire rooms. Yet by the late 1940s, innovations like the transistor would spark an electronics revolution. This tiny device, capable of amplifying and switching electronic signals, became the building block for modern computing. By the 1970s, microprocessors had evolved to the point where personal computers could sit on desktops, bringing computational power to individuals rather than just corporations or governments. This technological progress coincided with another revolutionary development: the Internet. Originally conceived as ARPANET by the U.S. Department of Defense in the late 1960s, this network of computers expanded gradually through academic and research institutions. By the 1990s, the World Wide Web transformed this military academic project into a global communication system accessible to anyone with a computer and modem. Suddenly, information that once required libraries and experts became available at fingertips worldwide. Globalization accelerated alongside these technological advances. Container shipping, developed in the 1950s, revolutionized international trade by drastically reducing transportation costs. Air travel became increasingly affordable, connecting distant regions like never before. Multinational corporations established complex supply chains, spanning continents, while financial markets became interconnected 24 hours a day. These developments created unprecedented economic opportunities while raising concerns about labor conditions, environmental impact, and cultural homogenization. The information age brought profound changes to social structures and individual lives. Smartphones, emerging in the late 2000s, combined computing power with constant connectivity, fundamentally altering how people interacted. Social media platforms created new public spheres where ideas spread instantly across borders. Traditional gatekeepers of information, newspapers, television networks, academic institutions, faced competition from user-generated content and decentralized knowledge sharing. This democratization of information empowered individuals while challenging established authorities. Medical advancements paralleled these technological leaps. Vaccines eradicated diseases like smallpox, while antibiotics revolutionized infection treatment. Genetic engineering opened possibilities for curing hereditary conditions and enhancing agricultural productivity. Imaging technologies allowed doctors to diagnose and treat conditions with unprecedented precision. Life expectancy increased dramatically worldwide, though access to these medical breakthroughs remained uneven, highlighting persistent global inequalities. Space exploration represented another frontier of human achievement. Beginning with Sputnik in 1957, the space race between the United States and Soviet Union led to remarkable accomplishments. 12 humans walked on the moon between 1969 and 1972. Satellites revolutionized communications, weather forecasting, and Earth observation. The International Space Station, operational since 1998, demonstrated international cooperation in scientific research beyond Earth's atmosphere. These achievements came with significant challenges. Climate change emerged as perhaps humanity's greatest collective threat. Industrial activities since the 1800s had steadily increased atmospheric carbon dioxide levels. By the late 20th century, scientific consensus recognized human activity as the primary driver of global warming. Extreme weather events, rising sea levels, and ecosystem disruptions demonstrated climate change's immediate impacts, while future projections raised alarming possibilities. Social movements responded to both new opportunities and persistent injustices. Civil rights movements gained momentum globally, challenging racial, gender, and sexual orientation discrimination. Feminist waves reshaped workplace dynamics, reproductive rights, and gender roles. Indigenous peoples organized transnationally to protect their lands and cultures. Environmental activism grew from local protests to global campaigns demanding action against pollution and resource depletion. These movements utilized new communication technologies to organize and advocate more effectively. Economic systems underwent significant transformations. Neoliberal policies emphasizing free markets and deregulation gained prominence in the 1980s under leaders like Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher. These approaches facilitated rapid economic growth in some regions, while increasing inequality within and between nations. China's economic reforms, beginning in the late 1970s, demonstrated alternative paths to development, combining market mechanisms with state control. Emerging economies in Asia, Africa, and Latin America followed diverse trajectories influenced by both global trends and local conditions. Cultural production reflected and shaped these changes. Film, music, literature, and visual arts engaged with themes of identity, technology, and globalization. Artists utilized digital tools to create works that challenged traditional boundaries between mediums and audiences. Cultural products circulated globally, while local traditions adapted to new influences. This dynamic interplay between global and local manifested in phenomena like K-pop, Bollywood cinema's international success, and fusion cuisines blending culinary traditions from multiple cultures. Military conflicts took new forms in this era. Asymmetric warfare replaced conventional battles between nation-states. Terrorist organizations like Al-Qaeda and later ISIS utilized global networks to coordinate attacks across continents. Cyber warfare emerged as a new battlefield, with state and non-state actors targeting critical infrastructure through digital means. Nuclear proliferation raised concerns about weapons falling into unstable hands, while arms races continued in space and cyberspace. Looking forward, humanity faces choices that will determine its trajectory for generations. Artificial intelligence promises to revolutionize industries from healthcare to transportation, while raising ethical questions about employment, privacy, and decision-making. Biotechnology offers solutions to food security and disease prevention, while prompting debates about genetic modification and human enhancement. Renewable energy technologies aim to address climate change while transforming global energy markets. The modern era demonstrates humanity's remarkable capacity for innovation and adaptation. Yet it also reveals persistent challenges: inequality, environmental degradation, conflict that require collective action and wise leadership. As we conclude our journey through world history, we recognize patterns repeating across centuries while acknowledging unique aspects of our contemporary moment. The choices made today will shape whether future generations inherit a world of opportunity or one facing existential crises.